Hi, my name's Victoria. I'm a child psychiatrist and parent coach, and I'm also a mum. And I'm doing a series of videos on mental health difficulties. And today I'm talking about how parenting really needs to adjust when your child is suffering mental health difficulties, and how some things that we might do as parents with children who don't have mental health difficulties don't really work when your child does. If you do like my videos, please do subscribe either to my YouTube channel or like my Facebook page, because all of my videos and my blog posts do come out on there every week. And also, if you'd like a little bit more, so I usually have an extra tip or an extra video that I give to people who are on my email list, please do subscribe, and I will put the link in the description of this video. Otherwise, stay tuned and have a listen to my thoughts about how parenting needs to adjust when it comes to parenting children with mental health difficulties. So I'm going to be talking very specifically about the balanced parenting approach that I talk about quite a lot, and I'm going to be increasingly talking about this because I really want to develop this as a thought and idea, because to me it really does make the most sense. So I'm going to talk about the 4 different things that are part of balanced parenting and how sometimes unfortunately they don't work. So I'll start with the safe base. So the safe base actually is one of those things that probably doesn't change so much with mental health difficulties. We all need a safe base all the time to kind of feel that we can explore our thoughts and we can feel safe to get better. But I think what is the most important thing in the safe base maybe does change. So for example, if your child's got sort of emotional difficulties like anxiety or depression, they might be more focused on having an emotional space to explore things. Whereas for someone who might have autistic spectrum disorder, the safety will be much more around kind of having boundaries, routines, knowing what to expect. So I think what creates a safe base is different depending on what kind of mental health difficulties your child has. The second part is sensitivity, and I think this is where we can really sometimes fall down, because I always talk about how important sensitivity is, how being attuned to your child is almost like a superpower for parents. But sometimes what happens is we get attuned not to the child but to their illness, and that means we can get caught up in basically promoting their illness and supporting their illness rather than supporting them. I think this can especially happen in things like eating disorders. Can be really difficult to understand what is your child and what is the eating disorder demanding certain things. And similarly for anxiety, because your child might find certain situations difficult and you might, be very attuned to that and want to help them avoid them, but actually what you're doing is promoting avoidance, and that's not going to help them get better in the long term. So again, adjusting the sensitivity is really important so you don't get caught up in the agenda of the mental illness rather than actually in your child's recovery. And this is, tremendously difficult. We often do work with this. The third part of this is the boundaries and the frameworks. And again, I think this is really different depending on what difficulty your child has. So for example, for anxiety, you might use this a lot to help your child not avoid anxiety-provoking situations and really supporting them to just, go out there and do things that they find a bit scary. You might put more boundaries in. Whereas for someone who's depressed, putting in loads and loads of boundaries might not be that helpful, because there'll be a limit to what they can really engage with, and actually pushing them beyond that is not going to be helpful. So I think, again, really important to think about how to use boundaries in the right way depending on what kind of mental health difficulty your child has. And the fourth thing I often talk about is the nurture. And I think for me this is a bit similar to sensitivity, is that we have to be careful to nurture the young person or the child, not their mental health difficulty. And I think separating the two can be very difficult. And again, a really great example could be something like obsessive compulsive disorder, where children become really obsessed with certain things, and you might think you're kind of nurturing them and that's their personality, but actually you're nurturing the illness that is there rather than nurturing them, which allows them to fight the illness. Because obviously the more we nurture our child rather than the illness, I guess the more strength we give them to fight the illness. So I think, again, separating what the illness is and what your child is, and actually which one is it that you're nurturing, is really, really important. And that's why in the teen mental health course that's coming out, I've kind of given a little bit of thoughts for different illnesses, like how maybe those 4 different things really change. And I think finally, the fifth thing I talk about is the authenticity that you have as a parent. And of course, with mental health difficulties, sometimes you find yourself doing things that may not feel very authentic, but that your child really, really needs you to do. kind of really good example is if you're someone who's quite relaxed and quite, free flowing, and maybe you don't really like boundaries, but you have a child maybe with autistic spectrum disorder who just really, really needs things to be boundaried, then you might find yourself having to act in a way that maybe doesn't feel very authentic. And it is really difficult to find a kind of really good balance with that, where you feel able to do that regularly, but you sort of still feel like yourself. But sometimes I think our authenticity can be really challenged by mental health difficulties. And I think especially if it's a mental health difficulty that maybe improves, so it's something that, like depression or anxiety that can heal and go away, then thinking about it as something that's temporary is helpful. But some mental health difficulties that maybe aren't as temporary, and that, some of it is going to be left over, and you might have to kind of adjust your whole way of being. I think finding ways of incorporating that into your personality, if it's something that really helps your child feel better, is again kind of really important. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you do like my videos, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, and definitely get on my email list so you can be the first to know.